So if you have not seen the previous episodes, please go back and watch them. In this we're creating a sequential pivot modulation. The only reason I say sequential pivot, because we've been done that before, but sequential literally means it's exactly the same pattern repeating every time you modulate melodically, harmonically, it all just kind of the same. Wagner was famous for doing stuff like this, but it's also very handy for people who want to do film scores and whatnot. And so that's why this is just kind of an introduction to sequential patterns. And if you haven't watched the beginning of this series, please do so. But first, we're going to create the zigzag like we talked about. That's why you have to watch the beginning series. We're going to go 1, 5, 3, and then the 6th chord, and we're going to repeat this in D minor. This is our pivot chord actually, because that's also the 3 chord of D minor. So point towards the chords in order. Remember we were talking about zigzag mapping. Okay, 1, 5, 3, 4, and we're going to use some inversions and even the 7th chord. So there's your sequence there. Now that sequence is going to repeat in D minor, and this is showing that you also don't need a 5 chord in order to pivot. You don't need that strong 5-to-1 pivot. So there's the connection right there. So we always draw in the connections just so you see them, that it's common to both keys. And we're going to go ahead and jump to D minor and do the same exact thing. 1, 5, 3, 6. Okay, this would create a harmonic sequential modulation, sequential pivots, sequential harmonic sequential pivots. And there it is in D minor written out for you, pointing out towards the chords that we're using in the order. Now when I get to G, the G minor chord, I'm just going to break away from the sequential, but point towards the common chord first. That's our pivot point again, but that'll pivot us to a G minor chord, and then at that point I'm just going to break away from it, the harmonic sequence, because you don't want to do harmonic sequences forever and ever, because it'll actually end up boring somebody if you just. So basically when I hit that G minor chord, it's kind of free to go wherever you want, and I've already have a sequence that I have in mind, so I'm going to go ahead and write it out here. Let's do A minor, E minor first inversion. That means with the G in the bass. Now we're going to use a C major 7th and 1st inversion. Then the 6th chord, F major. And that's going to be our pivot point. And we're going to do this, we're going to do something here. We're going to actually repeat that F major chord, but with the major 7th in the lowest end. But let's write out the chords first. So A minor 1. Let's just write them out in just the basic Roman numerals, and we'll put the chord D inversions on the top. Most people like the slash chord style method, so that's what we'll do to show the inversions. So we'll go ahead and stick what chords they are. I mean, you literally should know inversions. I mean, that's especially of simple chords, but and well, of all chords actually. So C major 7th over E. So that's just a C chord with major 7th with the E as the lowest note. F major. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to jump up. We're going to arpeggiate this F major to where the 7th, a major 7th, is the lowest in the bass, and that'll kind of pull us towards that D minor chord. And later on we'll see how. But that's our pivot point. That's gonna we'll just use that 6th chord as the D minor. It's also the 3 chord in D minor. So either one of the F chords could be considered the pivot point. So get up there. So we don't really need a strong raised third 5-to-1 cadence. You can travel in between natural minors fairly easy. You just gotta actually make it musical, and that's the part I really can't teach. I could just show you from examples I create on the spot, or So let's write what that is. You know, that's actually going to be a very cool move, and this is actually sounds very cool in strings. So I'm going to do something I never do, and I never use full string patches because I don't know, I just rarely ever use them. I prefer to really actually section things out. But in this case, that's the only way to show that this will actually produce a really cool string line. So I just actually copied and pasted that. I'm just literally going to transpose it up to D minor because it's repeating that harmonic sequence again. So it would sound cool in strings. That's why I'm going to use a full strings patch, which I never do in any of my videos except this once. I'm going to do it. So D, let's just change the Roman numeral setup. Just making sure everything's in order. So always double check. Now we've arrived at our G minor chord. Okay, and there I'm gonna break away. So okay, so there's our harmonic sequence and break away. Just remember, you can actually keep the same sequence going all the way through the counterclockwise version of the circle of fifths. However, it'll get boring, so I'm going to hit play and listen to it. Now, there's no musicality to this. It's just straightforward. But so we're not using any strong pull cadences here. So let me go ahead and pull up my so I use, like I said, no full strings. So I'm going to do my rare use of full strings. And I'm using a expression pedal to go through the dynamic layers. So that way I can, and a sustain pedal because I'm not very good at holding notes over some. And I do use, by the way, Vienna Symphonic Orchestra for pretty much everything except choir. So let's go ahead and play through the sequence a little bit, make it a little more musical. I'll use the expression pedal when I create dynamics and just, you know, a general idea of what it might sound like with strings. So yeah, basically after this harmonic sequence that literally repeats the same exact structure twice, I break out of it when I hit the G minor chord. And interestingly enough, I start heading a little bit towards D minor, or when I hit on the end on the A chord. I mean, by itself, that A chord's kind of pretty neutral, and you could go pretty much anywhere at that point. However, that's way beyond the scope of this video. We just wanted to start establishing, starting to recognize harmonic sequence as opposed to pivot modulations that are not as sequential as this. This is very structured. So again, pivot modulation, you're using a pivot sequential modulation. You're using the same exact kind of material over and over again while you pivot into a new key. And in this series, if you haven't seen it, we've done quite a few pivot modulations using sequences. So harmonic sequences that reoccur in the new key. So please go back and watch them. This is just more of pointing it out, really, that the same thing occurring every time you modulate.